Good afternoon, Colorado Springs. It is a joy to be with you today in this hot weather we're having, at least for Colorado Springs. I'm not complaining. I just got back from Florida last week, and actually the beginning of this week, and it was this hot and humid. So thank you, God, that I live in a place that doesn't have the humidity all the time. So today is a special day. I have a special guest with me in the studio. Here live with me. His name is Jonathan Crowe, and he is, let's see, I got his biography page here. Let's see, you come from across the pond, right? London, Ontario, Canada. You're one of those border crossers.
Yes, that's right.
Jonathan, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Brian. I've wanted to see behind the scenes, and now I get to do that. I wish I wasn't here. Maybe I was on the other side of the glass, but... And we'll let that go for today.
Well, I know you've been a little bit apprehensive about doing this because you have a long history in radio and in production, and we'll talk about that over the course of the next hour. But it's on the other side of the partition.
Yes,
it's not behind a microphone.
Having this thing stuck in front of my face is a little uncomfortable, a little intimidating, Brian. But I'm with you, and I know you'll carry it, so I'm good.
I'll do my best to get you through it. Okay?
I know you will.
I will be the hands and feet of Jesus to lead you through this trial. And I'm really glad you agreed to do this and to come in because I've been kind of intrigued by your story and some of the things that the Lord has opened up doors for you to do. And so ultimately, I want to get to that, but I want to start with a place that I've started with just about every guest I've had in here. Tell me how you came to know Jesus. How did you come into this relationship with Christ? Because I've been fascinated by the different stories.
Well, mine isn't too dramatic, I don't think, but I'm very thrilled about that, actually. I grew up in a Christian family. My dad was a lay Baptist pastor, and I accepted Jesus when I was 7 years old. Mm-hmm. But there was a time, almost 2 years, where I was convicted, even as a youngster. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it had to do with fear of dying and also the Lord's return. I thought, well, if he returned, I wouldn't be ready and I'd go to hell.
Interesting. I certainly know of many like yourself that came to Christ early on. Many who did so and then in their later teenage years had a pretty good falling away, trying to find their own way through. And of course, the Lord didn't let go of them. Right. And he drew them back. But that's not your story. Your story sounds to me like it's more of not so much the immensity of God's saving power, but the immensity of his keeping power.
Right. And I think, Brian, as I get older, I'm just more aware of what a sinner I really am.
Well, and that's why, I made a little note here when you said, my story's not too dramatic. And I thought, I understand exactly what you're saying, but it really is when you think about it. You were going to hell.
Yeah.
And now you're not.
Right.
That's pretty dramatic.
Right. It saved me from a lot of trouble in my life.
Sure.
So yeah. I'm thrilled about that.
We're grateful for the testimonies of those that God pulled out of the gutter. But
Absolutely.
What an amazing thing to be at a place in your life. We're in our later years. I'm certainly on the downward side of the hill.
I'm way down.
And even when I was 50 and people say, oh, no, you're middle-aged, it's like, I'd feel better about that if I knew more people that were 100. But I didn't. So I'm definitely, a decade past that now. And I think when you look at things that you never did get involved in and God kept you from that, it is a massive blessing. Yeah. And so good on you for letting the Lord get a hold of you and walking with him and continuing on in that. Now, your story then is one of really at an early age coming to the Lord, but also through those early ages and teen years, really trusting in the Lord for what he was doing in your life and the directions that he was leading you in.
And I didn't do it perfectly, for sure.
What?
If my mom was still alive, she probably said I was probably one of the more difficult of the 7 kids, in the family to raise. So it wasn't all smooth sailing,
Sure, but you never had that time where you, seriously walked away from the Lord.
No, not really.
So what was your life like? You're growing up in Canada. And so, for most of us uneducated Americans down here, us Yanks, it's the frozen tundra. I've had the opportunity to spend, I've gone up to Calgary a couple of times, right in the middle of the country, pretty much, just almost directly north of here. And beautiful, beautiful country. But man, it's cold in the wintertime.
Right. Well, I didn't grow up in the West. I grew up in more central or eastern Canada, close to Toronto, a city called London, Ontario.
Which is pretty much north of Detroit, yes?
Yes. It's 150 miles from Detroit.
Okay.
And I can tell you when I was growing up, in July, there would be Americans coming across the border with skis on the back of their car, thinking they were going to get snow. It was only 100 degrees there and humid,
Well, to be fair, they were from Detroit.
We don't have anybody from Detroit listening, do we?
No, probably not. I'll get letters.
We don't now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So growing up in Canada, what would you say was one of the marked differences from what you see with kids growing up here?
Well, I really don't know how to compare it.
Okay.
You'd probably say something similar, too. The years that I was growing up, Canada is much different today than it was back then.
Sure.
And life was much different. We could wander around, go into the woods and play and do that things because I grew up in the country. And so...
Are you finding that different in Canada as well as here? I assume you get back there quite often.
Yes, we go back to see family and friends. I don't know if we're going to get into it or not, but we adopted our girls. We have 2 daughters.
Okay.
When they were very young in Ottawa, Canada. And they never really lived in Canada. They lived most of their life here in Colorado Springs. Okay. So they think of Canada as being fun and all of that. Well, it's just because we're visiting friends and it's a vacation kind of atmosphere, So. And
is it the same in Canada as it is here where parents aren't as apt to let their kids just run amok? I remember my parents throwing me out of the house and saying, come back when the street lights come on.
Yeah.
It's not that way in America anymore, is it?
Yeah. I think it runs the gamut there just like it does here.
Okay.
And, of course, we haven't lived there for 33 years, so how it is now in a lot of ways I'm not as familiar with. But, in a lot of ways I don't see too much difference between Canada and here.
Okay. Yeah.
Politically, there's some differences, of course.
Yeah, of course. But a lot of the culture seems to be very similar.
Right. So, and if you look at a map, a lot of the cities and so on are very close to the U.S. border, aren't they?
Right.
So Canada, when I was growing up, and I think it still is heavily influenced by the U.S.
Yes.
And U.S. media and so on.
So you went on, many of our listeners, I'm sure, are familiar with Adventures in Odyssey, produced by Focus on the Family, and they were a staple in our house when our kids were young. We listened. I remember the kids just rushing to get ready for bed, and if they were in bed, everything done at 8 o'clock, they could listen to Adventures in Odyssey, and they loved the program. And as parents, we enjoyed the program. Humor for adults as well as kids, and the stories were always just so well done. But this started this desire to be a part of something like that long before Adventures in Odyssey existed.
Before Focus on the Family existed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to presume that you're that old.
Yes, I am. Yes. I just had to hobble into the studio, Brian.
We'll get you your walker on your way out.
Thank you.
But in all seriousness, this bug started in you at an early age. Like, we're talking about prevenient grace and God.
I like that word you used.
Yeah. God preparing you when you're young for things that he has for you when you're older. So talk about that, because you started in your creative processes that clearly would lead you down this road at a very young age.
The first interest I had in creative things came when I was 7 years old. My dad, as I told you, was a pastor of a small church, and one of the young people from his youth group came in with a cassette recorder. And my mom was playing the piano, and he recorded it on the cassette recorder and played it back, and I heard it. I thought, what is that thing? Wow, you can record the sound on that thing? That's my first recollections that I had some inkling towards recorded material.
Okay.
The other thing, Brian, I wasn't an athlete in school at all. I tried, but failed
looking at you
miserably.
now, I'm shocked.
Yes, you're shocked. Were you an athlete?
No.
No, okay. Well, you can identify with me then.
I could run, but mostly from dogs.
Oh, okay. Well, I started running later in life, but anyway, yeah.
So now you've got this idea that, we can record things. And so where does that take you?
There were several things that happened that gave me that interest. But by 12th grade, do you remember Bogan amplifiers? They're PA.
Yeah.
I had a little PA thing and a reel-to-reel tape machine that my dad had gotten and a turntable. And I found that if I put some felt on the top of the turntable, I could cue a record. This is ancient. And by 12th grade, I was producing my own 15-minute television show on our local cablecast station in London, a weekly show. And
wow. That's great.
This was long before the Muppet Show, but the puppets, I had puppets that were the hosts, and then I had 2 live artists that would come in. I dramatized a little Bible story in the center of the program, and I had to really coerce my brothers and sisters to be the talent. They didn't really like that. Part of it
did they enjoy it when they got to see themselves on TV?
Well, they didn't see themselves on TV. They were the voice of the puppets. They operated the voices.
Gotcha.
We used to try to do the voices live, but we fought too much. And so recording it, at least the people couldn't hear us fighting, get out of my way. You're in my space here, But, when I think about that year of doing that television show, humble as it was and as terrible as quality as it was, you'd laugh if you saw it now, I'm sure.
Oh, sure.
But
I laugh at music I used to really, really like back then, too. Everything evolves.
Yeah. But to think, just winding ahead to when I came to focus on the family and the years that I spent doing sound design for Adventures in Odyssey, I mean, I would never have thought of that back then. First of all, I didn't think I was talented enough to do anything creative. So I thought I'd better get a real job.
Well, yeah, you in our conversations, you've mentioned that you just didn't know if you could ever actually make that a career.
Right.
But you, at the point that you're doing that 15-minute once a week television show, you're a senior year in high school.
Yeah.
Assuming that the Canadian system works the same as ours does, which they should have adopted.
I wouldn't go that far, Brian. Maybe you're stretching it a little bit there. I don't know.
So you're a senior in high school. It's amazing what kids can do when they aren't tethered to a phone. There wasn't anything like that to distract us from letting our creativity work.
Right.
What a shame, actually, in so many ways.
The good thing about today is that you pick up your phone. It's a studio in itself now.
Sure.
They don't have to go back to those old kind of devices that I had to use to produce a program.
There is that.
It's amazing what you can do with that phone. So that's my encouragement to young people is if you're interested in creative work, video production or audio production, start with what you've got. You've got a phone or access to a phone. Start producing things with that. You never know how, if you really want to serve the Lord and turn your life over to the Lord, you never know where it will lead.
Yeah, there's more computing power in those phones now than what they used to send people to the moon.
Right.
I'm certainly not meaning to imply that they're all bad, but the distraction level. Right. I wish I saw more kids today being able to be creative and to just let their minds go, because that's amazing. That basically set the stage for you to continue on doing other production things through the years, yes?
Yeah, and another thing that happened in my youth was that the Ontario government offered opportunities for youth grant. So I applied for grants twice, 2 summers, and I got $10,000 both summers. And the idea was you had to hire students. So I hired students from the local...
How old were you at that point?
About 17, 18.
Okay.
So I hired them from a local community college television arts programs. And we put some programs together. And the professor at the college said, "Why are you not in this program?" And that's when it kind of turned that, well, maybe I should be in more of a creative role. Maybe that's something that God has for me.
Did you sign up for that program? Did you go through college?
Did. Yeah. And it was very hard to get into. And they let me in October when it was in full swing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so to me, that was another indication that God was leading me.
So you see these signs throughout your life that God has a plan and that he's moving you towards that plan, even though you're thinking, yeah, I'm not sure how this works.
Yeah.
So you graduated from college with a degree in some kind of degree in what?
Well, I did radio and television at start, but my love was with radio after a while because it was theater of the mind. And
Gotcha.
back then, it was so complicated when you tried to do anything television. Radio was simpler, and I loved theater of the mind. And so I graduated with a radio degree.
Awesome. Jonathan Crowe is with me here in the studio, and we've been talking about the things that God was doing in your life, Jonathan, to get you prepared for that opportunity that you had no idea at the time.
Absolutely not.
That something like that even existed.
Right.
We were talking, and there wasn't even really Christian radio in Canada when you first started out in radio.
Yeah, Christian broadcasters had to buy time on mainstream radio to get their message out.
So when you start working in radio, you're working at top 40 stations, you're working at rock and roll stations, and
right.
I'm sure that was quite an experience.
Right. Well, it really helped develop the craft. That was the real good thing. And the other thing about radio that was so nice was the immediacy of it. I did commercials and promos and, production for radio stations. And the beauty of that is I could produce something, drive around at night, listen to it in the car radio, and hear it up against the national commercial and say, how come my spot doesn't sound as good? And then, well, I'm going to go back to the station and I'm going to try and change a few things and see if I can improve that.
Yeah, I can see how it would put you in a place of listening, critically examining your work and saying, I want to make this better. I want to make this better. And people that have that attitude are the ones that are going to make it better and are ultimately going to excel.
I came by it naturally because I had a natural curiosity and desire to see the product improve. And I still have that to this day, which is the odd thing, after all these years.
Well, it's work ethic too. You have to be willing to work. You have to be willing to go, I can do better than that, and then go do it.
Right. Even though I was working in those kind of environments, Brian, I just felt that I still had a responsibility to do everything I could to do it as unto the Lord. Mm-hmm. Some of those environments, we talked about it, were quite unusual, some of the things that I was exposed to. And it was, I had to make the decision, am I going to be a Christian on Sunday or am I going to be a Christian 7 days a week?
Well, and I'm glad that you said that because that's been kind of a major theme of the program when I'm hosting it. When we don't have someone in here who's a missionary or a pastor in vocational Christian work and you're doing something else in and I hate the term because I don't like there being in people's minds such a clear-cut distinction between the secular world and the spiritual world because it should all be merged together. But in that secular environment, working in those radio stations, you worked in a recording studio where you had a lot of people coming in and doing work, names that would be recognized. And you're in that environment. It is the 1970s. It's sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yep.
And how did you find yourself putting feet to your faith in that environment?
Well, the first thing was that I had to decide what was I going to do and what wasn't I going to do.
So setting boundaries.
Boundaries, yes. And saying, no, that's not what I'm going to be doing, And that's hard, especially when I was young, too. I was 23 years old or something like that.
Yeah, because that can get in your head, and it would have been easy to
want to go along, want to be accepted and liked and stuff like that.
Let's face it, the enemy doesn't tempt us with roadkill. It ultimately turns out to be roadkill, but he dresses it up as filet mignon. And there's those things are appealing to our flesh. So being able to set boundaries and having the conviction to keep those boundaries that's something I think we need the strength of the Holy Spirit to persevere through those kinds of things.
Right. So I don't regret it at all. I think it was a wonderful preparation for what I eventually did with Adventures in Odyssey and so on.
Yeah, so you're getting all this experience. How did you hear about Adventures in Odyssey? Because you're a Canadian. you're not American. You weren't at the time. You're naturalized now. Thank you for coming through legal channels. We appreciate that. And so you're in Canada. How in the world do you even hear about Adventures in Odyssey?
Well, the city that we were living in and the radio station I was working at was in Ottawa, Canada. Do you know that's the national capital of Canada? I hope you do.
Of course, yes. Of course I do.
Well, yeah, good.
Yes,
good.
Thank you.
And
I do now.
my wife was a nurse, and I had dropped her off for her shift on a Sunday afternoon. And then
Where'd you pick her up along the way?
Well, it was in Ottawa. It was at a church business and professional group that we met.
Okay.
And I said, let's go through life together, shall we? But anyway, I had dropped Joyce off at the hospital, and as I was prone to do, I was scanning the dial for local radio stations and stations outside our market just to hear what they were doing because I had a real interest in it. And there's one crackly AM station that came way out from a small town, and they were playing the Focus on the Family weekend broadcast with Dr. Dobson and Mike Trout.
Oh,
and
wow.
they came on, this is back in 1987, and they said, and here at Focus on the Family, we're starting a new program, and it's called Adventures in Odyssey. And we're going to play you 10 minutes of this program. And so they played the 10-minute part of the program, staticky, crackly, but I fell in love with it. The voice work of those people, it was so professional, I couldn't believe it.
It was amazingly well done.
And then the writing, I thought, wow. And then the production, I even knew where they got a lot of those sound effects because I used them. And I liked the style of their production. It was more my style. I was in a rock and roll radio station where it was Zoom band, fast production. Mm-hmm. That's not really what I liked. I liked the more slow and build a scene kind of production. So I fell in love with Odyssey after that. Isn't that
just listening to it?
Yeah, from 10 minutes. That's all it took, 10 minutes.
So then you immediately jumped online. Oh, wait, no, that wasn't happening.
No, there wasn't any online. Yeah.
And you applied, and you got accepted right away, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I wish. The first thing I did was I went to the NRB.
So define NRB for our...
Yeah, I should. Okay. I should.
That's all right.
Sorry about that. National Religious Broadcasters Convention. Mm-hmm. And that's where I learned about a lot of Christian radio and ministries here in this country. And so I wanted to transition away from mainstream music radio into a ministry. And so I started applying different ministries. I even applied to Moody. People were interested when they heard my demo, my work, but it was the Canadian thing they didn't want to deal with. One wise guy at Moody, he said to me, well, we'd look at if you could marry an American woman. I said, well, what problem is there? I'm already married. What are you saying there at Moody?
Yeah. So you need to ditch her and marry an American. Yeah. Well, when we come back from this break, I want to kind of jump into that more because the Lord did open the doors, and here you are, and God did an amazing thing, and we're glad that He did. You are listening to Crosswalk. This is your host, Pastor Brian Michaels. We'll see you on the other side. Well, welcome back to Crosswalk. This is your host, Pastor Brian Michaels. Glad to have you with us. And I am talking to Jonathan Crowe, who was a sound designer on the Adventures in Odyssey program that Focus on the Family does. And I actually just looked it up just to check it out. And you can find that information on the show at adventuresinodyssey.com, and was reminded that this program is still on this station, 8 p.m. weekdays. And so 2 hours after we close down Crosswalk, you can still jump on and listen to it. If you're not familiar with it, I think you're going to be blessed. I think you'll be encouraged at just what a great program it is. And so, Jonathan, you got the opportunity to be a part of that. We were talking about it. You're in Canada. You find out about Adventures in Odyssey. You apply. Took a couple of times, and it was always the fact that you lived in another country. I mean, that requires
that big negative. Yeah.
Well, sure. And even though it's Canada, and we generally like Canada,
generally,
it was a process of visas and all that kind of stuff,
right.
And then moving you down here, and then if you got a work visa and something doesn't work out with the job, do you have a house, and that could be messy. But you mentioned that you saw the hand of God in that you didn't get hired immediately because Focus on the Family ended up going through a move.
That's right.
They were in California. They moved here to the Springs, And you likely would have been kind of caught up in the middle of that move with now a house in California, having to sell it and move like so many of them, I'm sure, did.
Mm-hmm.
So God's hand was even in that as to when you got the call. And that was 91. You came here in 92?
Yeah, I came and interviewed here in September 91. And they offered me the job in October. But then again, I had to wait a long time for the visa from October to February 14th. Valentine's Day.
Should have just flown south and walked back north.
Yeah, yeah. That would have been the simple way, but maybe not the best. And you're a cop, Brian. I can't believe you're saying that.
Well, I'm just saying, in theory, it might have worked.
Yeah, it
would have been faster.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been legal.
And the good thing was I couldn't believe that Focus waited for me that long and held the position.
Well, they must have wanted you.
That was the hand of God as I saw it, too. And, there were frustrating times during the wait.
Sure, I imagine.
Yeah. I changed my attitude and I said, this is a blessing that I have to wait because I have to see the hand of God move. And during that time when we were waiting, we were able to adopt 2 girls or sisters. One was 3 months old.
So you adopted them in the time of the waiting.
Right, in Ottawa. And that wouldn't have happened, and we didn't buy a house in L.A. like you mentioned. And the other thing I think, Brian, that I came to terms with was that I had something that a lot of other Focus employees didn't have, was that I had to see that God's hand move in a major way for me to go to
Or it wasn't going to work.
It wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And then I had to be comfortable that if it didn't work with me going to Focus, then God had something else for me.
Sure.
And I came to terms with that. Yeah.
Sure.
People often think, that the mountains moved for me to be able to come here. No, we moved to the mountains.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, you moved to America. Did you start the naturalization process right away?
Well,
to become a citizen?
We couldn't come across that border till we had a temporary visa.
Sure.
And it was only to work for Focus on the Family. If I came and Focus said, you're not what we thought, we're going to fire you. Well, we would have to sell our house and move back to Canada.
Sure.
It was that. But we were so excited, we didn't even think about that.
And now you are a naturalized U.S.
We are
citizen?
naturalized.
Well,
our whole family is. Yeah.
Yes.
This is
welcome to America.
Home. Yeah. We've been here 33 years, so this is home, Brian.
Yeah, so I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. I still hear faint traces of the accent, but I know that you consider this home. This is okay, Hoser.
Yeah.
So now you had a pretty major accident 8 years after moving here. Right. And we talked about this the other night.
Well, it was more than 8 years, but because we came here in 92, it was 2010, August 2010, almost 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So 18 years. And so
you good in maths, Brian?
Yeah, occasionally.
Oh, okay.
So you have this accident.
Yeah.
Serious accident, riding a bike, and you broke your neck in a number of places. And
yeah, one of the places that we liked to vacation at as a family was up in Frisco, Colorado, Summit County. And as a family, we were going to ride our bikes to Breckenridge to have lunch. And I don't know if any of you know what it's like going out of Frisco. There's a big, long hill that goes down. And before they changed it all there by the high school, it used to do a 90-degree turn. Well, I'd gotten my girls' bikes ready and my wife's bike already, and they were slower than me, and that was the problem, speed. And they took off ahead of me, and I was going to catch them when I got my bike. Well, I was going down that big hill going out of Frisco towards Breckenridge, and I looked up, and I thought I saw Joyce and the girls there. And I looked down, and there was a 90-degree turn, and I think I was going 40 miles an hour or not faster.
Missed it.
And I couldn't do it. So I thought, well, I'll just bounce out in this field, slow down and get back on it. And if I'd pulled over 35 degrees, Brian, I would have been fine.
Wow.
But I went straight out. It was weeds. I couldn't see it. It was a ditch. I went slamming into it, smashed. I held onto the handlebars of the bike as hard as I could. I just flipped, and my body just slammed into the side of the bank, fell into the stream down below. And as soon as I fell, I said, okay, I've messed some things up. But I stood up, got up, walked out of the ditch, and I was going so fast. I went by a guy and his wife, and he was a doctor. He came running up, and he said, lie down, lie down. I think we should call the guys with the board. I thought the guy was overreacting. So he called the hospital, did his hospital speak.
Yeah. Well, now you broke a vertebrae in your neck that pretty much miraculous the way that it broke, that you're still here.
Right. It was the C2, the C5, the C7, and the C2. If you break the spinal cord up there, you're not only quadriplegic.
So generally,
you can't breathe. You need breath for life, Brian. You know?
Right. And that's the one that Reeves broke.
Yeah, Christopher Reeve.
Yeah. And so
Superman.
That vertebrae breaking, if it's crushed, it severs the spinal cord generally, and that's what causes the paralysis.
Right.
But yours wasn't crushed. Yours somehow exploded outward.
That's the way it was explained to me. Although I found out later how God used that doctor to save my life. Because I found out later that when you walk away, like I was going to do, just push my bike back to where we were staying, that's when you die. That's when the spinal cord.
Well, sure. You've got pieces of bone like wandering around in there. One of them easily could have moved over and severed that cord.
So it said to me that God wasn't finished with me.
Yeah.
And
I think there's a real sense of that when you go through a traumatic injury like that and you realize how 1 inch this way, one bone breaking that way, and you wouldn't be here. That changes a lot of perspective about the fact that God obviously is not finished with my life yet.
Well, it's like Lazarus, though. Jesus brought him back from the dead. But he died.
Yeah.
So I realized that side of the story too, Brian.
And then had to die again.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
No thanks. Yeah. Once is enough. But, obviously you spent some time with the big halo rig around your head. And how long were you in that contraption?
Can you believe I was an angel? I had an angelic halo around me?
No, I can't.
No, I can't.
It was a metal halo.
There was a metal halo with screws in my head. That's what held it to my head. And then there was a big plastic thing that went right down to my waist with heavy wool on it. And it was one of the hottest falls that we had ever experienced at that time.
And how many times did you have a screw loose?
I had several screw loose. I've been screwed. I've got all the jokes.
I'm sure you've heard them all.
Every 3 weeks they had to change those screws, and
that's amazing. So just so you could be here with us today. So Jonathan Crowe, so glad to have you here in the studio with us. I know you've been a blessing to so many, and thank you for your work with Adventures in Odyssey. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Crosswalk Colorado Springs. We'll see you next time.
100.7 The Word.